Hello, and welcome to this Gather Bible study where two or more are gathered, flourishing in relationships. My name is Dr. Brooke Peterson, and I am so pleased that you are using this Bible study as a tool to learn more about what our sacred texts might say about health and flourishing in relationships. I am an associate professor of pastoral care at the Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago, where I work with students who are preparing to become pastors and deacons. In addition to my roles at LSTC, I am also a psychotherapist, and I have a small private practice in Chicago. I think that I was invited to write this Bible study because people have lots of questions about what healthy relationships might look like and how healthy relationships work in our lives. I know that many of us are thinking of people and experiences that we've had in relationships that felt healthy or unhealthy. And what I hope you will be able to do in this Bible study is ask questions about what God has to say about that and how we might turn to our sacred scriptures to help us when relationships are hard because people themselves are complicated. This study is broken down into three Bible studies, and they can go in multiple orders. So if the natural publication process doesn't work for you, I want to encourage you to feel free to move things around in ways that work for you and your group. I was motivated to write this study because I know that relationships are hard. In my counseling practice, I see this all the time. I remember this being something that came up for people when I was a parish pastor. It is just hard to love other people. And since the pandemic, we are facing a crisis of loneliness. In 2023, the Surgeon General of the US declared loneliness and isolation as a public health crisis. So I want to show you a few slides about how that data and research about the public health crisis that we are facing around loneliness and isolation might be impacting us. So here's some of the key data that came out of this Surgeon General's advisory on loneliness and social isolation. The first is that lacking social connection can increase the risk for premature death as much as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. That means that loneliness and social isolation don't just have an impact on us emotionally, it also has an impact on us physically. Approximately half of US adults report experiencing loneliness, with some of the highest rates among youth and young adults. And that rate of loneliness among young adults has increased every year between 1976 and 2019. This isn't something that's just happening to some of us. This is happening to people across the age spectrum in our communities. And additionally, adults across the globe rate their social relationships, particularly with family and close friends, as the most important source of meaning, purpose, and motivation in their lives. It's really important that we are talking about what healthy relationships are and how we can support healthy relationships by looking at the stories that we find in our Bibles. But this epidemic of loneliness and isolation isn't just about any kind of relationships. There's a few things that are important for us to note here. First of all, that the structure, the number and variety of relationships that we have, as well as the frequency of those interactions, impact us both emotionally and physically. That means that those groups that you're gathering with to do these Bible studies are a part of creating support for people who might be experiencing loneliness and isolation. It also means that the function of our relationships, the way that those relationships serve various needs, are really important to us. That means not all relationships provide us with emotional support. Not all relationships are able to provide us with support in a crisis. And so when we think about what healthy relationships are that have an impact on us, we're also thinking about how often we interact with those people and how many of them we have, as well as the ways that our relationships are supporting us, the kinds of functions that relationships provide in our lives. And finally, the last part of thinking about these kind of healthy and supportive relationships are also the quality of our relationships. That means whether we experience a lot of relationship satisfaction, not that our relationships need to be perfect. I think when all of us think about healthy relationships, we're rarely thinking about relationships that are perfect. We're thinking about relationships that feel satisfying a lot and can face strain and recover from them. So this is an important part of what's grounding our Bible study that you're going to be working on today. The first part of our Bible study has to deal with healthy relationships that form us. And in particular, I was thinking about relationships within our families. Um, Something that is interesting is that throughout our Bible, we find stories of family relationships over and over again. I was very excited in this first Bible study to explore the relationship between Jacob and Esau and the family that surrounds them, as well as the story of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. So you're going to be able to look at both the text from Genesis as well as New Testament texts that involve Mary, Martha, and Lazarus to see what you notice about these siblings, to look at the ways that those families are interacting and whether those things are healthy and helpful, or whether those are things that we want to look at and say, God's raising some questions about how those people are working together. Another really exciting activity that I think that you can work on in your groups in this early Bible study is working on genograms. So when I began teaching the Introduction to Pastoral Care classes at LSTC, I always assigned my students and continue to assign them a genogram project. This may be a totally new word for you, but many of you have done things where you have worked on genealogy or making maps of your families or doing a family tree. And a genogram is a lot like that, except that genograms make a map of our families while also looking for patterns that explain areas of strength and tension, for looking for patterns about how people interact or maybe don't interact, for ways that there's healthy relationships and relationships that have experienced intense strain. And so with your Bible study group, you get to take examples of genograms. You can work on genograms of the biblical families that you look at in this Bible study, as well as your own genograms to figure out about how you have been formed in relationships, and in particular, the ways that you might see God in that formation within your families. There's some really great questions that you can ask when you're making a genogram. And within the Bible study, there's some links for you to watch videos and to read more about how we might create a genogram. But some really great questions that you can ask are like, what are the patterns of closeness and distance among my family? Are there special alliances that cross generational lines? What are family beliefs and values, and how were those expressed? How does loss and grief show up in those formative relationships I had when I was growing up? Are there kind of repetitive relationships or functioning across generations? What roles or rituals were a part of my family legacy? What are the strengths in my family? Where might I find more about my family? And so it's really exciting to be able to do this Bible study and then also directly apply some of these things that you're talking about in the Bible study to your own families. I'm so excited you're here. I'm so excited that you have committed to thinking about healthy relationships over these next 3 Bible study sessions, and I look forward to accompanying you along the way.